In this lesson, I'll be going over how to create the Titan Kids 1 as a 3D model in Fusion 360. Once your model is created, you will then create a projection sketch, bring it into a graphic design software like Adobe Illustrator, where you can create some vector-based artwork to personalize it. Finally, I'll show you how to import your artwork back into Fusion 360 so you can extrude it into the 3D model. But first, let's take a look at this drawing from Titans of CNC. Looking at the front view, you can see that this part is consisted of 4 different circles that are intersected by a rectangle. Once you have these basic shapes in place, we will extrude them to 750 thousandths, as you see on our right-hand view. After it's been extruded, we'll add in our corner fillets to blend these hard corners. And then lastly, we'll add in our edge breaks, which is this 80 thousandths chamfer at 45 degrees. So let's jump into Fusion 360 and get started. Now that we're in Fusion 360, the very first thing that we need to verify is our document settings. This particular drawing is drawn in inches, and we need to make sure that we are designing in inches inside of Fusion 360. The easiest way to do this is in the design workspace. We'll gesture over to the browser list, which can be found in the left-hand side, and then left-clicking on the side caret next to document settings, which will show us our design units. If you are currently not working in inches, you can always change this by left-clicking on the Change Active Units button. This will open up this dialog box, and you can select a different unit of measure from the drop-down menu. Once you've done this, we are going to start our sketch. There's several different ways to start our sketch. The easiest way to start your sketch is by using some keyboard shortcuts. In this example, I'm going to press the letter R on the keyboard for rectangle. Once I've done so, Fusion 360 is going to ask me, where do you want to place your sketch? Currently, there's no other solid bodies for me to select, and the easiest way to start our sketch is by clicking on one of these 3 normal planes. A good habit is to start your sketches on the bottom plane, which is our top view. For beginners, the easiest way to ensure that you are clicking on the bottom plane is if you gesture the upper right-hand corner of our workspace, you will find the view cube, and you can left-click on the word top. This will verify that this is the bottom plane, since all the other 2 planes are hidden at this point, and you can left-click on this to select it. Once you've selected your plane, we need to anchor our rectangle to the origin, which is this thing in the center of our workspace. You are going to left click on the origin and release and gesture your mouse away. You will notice that you have some dimension lines up here on the outside of your rectangle. The blue one is currently the one you are editing. The height of our rectangle is 3 inches, so I'm going to type in 3. And then pressing the tab button on the keyboard, moving over to the width of our rectangle, which is 1 inch, 350 thousandths. Afterwards, press enter on the keyboard to lock those 2 dimensions into place. At this point, you'll notice that the rectangle is black in color. This is indicating it is fully defined. If any of the outside shapes are blue, this is indicating that you are missing a constraint or a dimension and it is underdefined. Now that we have our rectangle in place, we'll start adding some of our circles. Again, using the keyboard shortcut C on the keyboard, this will activate the circle mode. In the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to left-click on the corner of our rectangle, and again, releasing it and gesturing away. In the edit window, I'm going to type in a mathematical formula. Since this drawing is called out as a radius, I'm going to type in 0.75, the multiply symbol 2, and this will give us our diameter of 1 inch 500 thousandths. At any point you can move your dimension lines around and then also the extension lines around to better organize things. Once we have our first circle in place, we're going to add the 3 subsequent circles by pressing, again, C on the keyboard. This time I'm going to make these circles arbitrary in dimension. And then I am going to add in an equal constraint at the very end to make them all equal to each other. To do so, I'll go up to the toolbar, to Constraints, and then down to Equal. If we left click on the perimeter of the first circle and then the subsequent circles, this will make them equal to each other. The purpose of making things equal to each other and by using constraints is so we can eventually make what they call a driven part. A driven part is if I ever want to change the dimensions of one thing, it will drive the dimensions of everything else. So for example, if I wanted to change this dimension of our circles to 1 inch 600 thousandths, I can change one dimension and they will all update for us. Now that we have our sketch fully defined, and again, a fully defined sketch indicates that the outside shapes are all black in color, we can now change this into a solid body by extruding it by pressing the letter E on the keyboard. E is for extrude. The easiest way to select our profiles is, since we are selecting all of them, is by using a selection window. To do so, we're going to gesture our mouse cursor up to the upper left-hand corner, left click, and dragging through the entire part and releasing. This will select all of our vectors that are currently in our workspace. Thickness of our part is 750 thousandths. So in the edit window, I will type in 750 thousandths and enter on the keyboard. You can free orbit around the part. And at this point, you will see that now we've gone from a sketch into a 3-dimensional model. We're not done yet with this part though. Notice that we have some hard edges here that are going from the circles into our rectangle. We're going to blend these together by using a solid body fillet. F on the keyboard is the keyboard shortcut for a fillet. I'm going to left click on these vertical lines that make up these locations. There are 6 of them total. You'll notice that there are some shortcuts that I'm showing you in Fusion 360. One is the ability to look through the part at various edges. If you are unable to do this, you can always do a free orbit around and select those objects. The dimension of this fillet is 190 thousandths, so 0.19. Enter again on the keyboard. Now that we have our fillets in place, the very last thing that you will add on pretty much all of your parts is our edge break, which is called a chamfer. To add this in, we're going to gesture up to the toolbar to modify, down to chamfer. We're going to click on the outside edge profile of the top of our part, and then repeating this on the bottom of our part. And this will select this entire chain around the outside. The dimension of our chamfer is 80 thousandths at 45 degrees. The default setting in Fusion 360 is equal distance, which is a 45, 45, 90 degree triangle. If you ever want to change this angle from away from 45 degrees, you can always click on this drop down menu and then choose distance and angle. Again, afterwards, go ahead and press OK or enter on the keyboard. Now that we have our part modeled, we need to change its physical properties. Again, we're going to go over to our browser list. This time we're going to go over to the folder labeled bodies and left click on the side caret. Right now you should have one body located in our bodies folder. We are going to right click on this body and gesture down to physical material. In the dialog box, we'll open up the folder marked material and then scroll through this list looking for the material labeled as aluminum 6061. Once you've found this material, you're going to left click and hold that left click down on the mouse and then drag it onto the part and release that left click. Once you've done so, you'll find at the very top, it'll say that aluminum 6061 has been applied to the part. It will override the previous material that was used in this design. So if you see two materials in there, the newest one will override the other one, even though that you can see it. Afterwards, go ahead and close this dialog box out. And then now we are going to check this body's physical properties. Again, gesturing over to our body 1, right clicking on this. However, this time we're going to make our way down to the properties. In this example, our mass of our part, if you were using aluminum 6061, should be 10.774 ounces, and the volume should be 6.9036 cubic inches. Once you verified that this is correct, we're ready to continue on. We can go ahead and press OK in our dialog box. Now that we've verified our 3D model's mass and volume, now we are ready to project our sketch. To do so, we're going to press the keyboard shortcut P. Once you do this, Fusion 360 is going to prompt you for where do you want our new sketch to be on. At this point, do not click on the 3 normal planes. What you do want to ensure is that our view cube is set to top, and you are going to left click on the top of our part, again, away from the 3 normal planes. This will select the very top of our part. Afterwards, we want the center of our dog bone here to be our projection sketch, so I'm going to click on this face. In our dialog box, you'll notice that there's one object selected. Afterwards, go ahead and press OK. You will notice these purple lines that have been created for us. Those lines are our projection sketch. We're going to finish our sketch from our toolbar. And then if we go over to our browser list and left click on the side caret next to sketches, you will notice that we have 2 sketches that are in our sketch folder. We have our original sketch that was used to create the part, and we have our projection sketch. By clicking on the visibility eye next to our sketches, we can turn these objects on and or off. We're going to label our sketch here as projection. To do so, I'm going to left click, wait a second, and then left click again. This will enable us to rename our sketch. Again, I'm going to label this projection and then press enter on the keyboard. I want to export this projection sketch as a DXF so I can import it into Adobe Illustrator. To do so, I'm going to right click on the sketch, gesture down to export DXF. In our dialog box, we'll press OK. In the new dialog box, we want to make sure that we name this appropriately. I'm going to label this Titan Kids 1 projection. I'm going to ensure that this checkbox is checked and then change our file location to my downloads. Afterwards, go ahead and press save. In Adobe Illustrator, I'm going to create an inch-based artboard. You need to make sure that the unit of measure in your graphic design is the same unit of measure that you created in Fusion 360. That way you are ensuring that the scaling is correct. Now that we have our inch-based artboard, we're going to place our sketch object onto our artboard. To do so, we'll go to the File menu, down to Place. In our dialog box, we'll gesture over to our Downloads, select our file type, but before you hit Place, you need to check this box where it says Show Import Options. then place. In the dialog box, we want to make sure that the radio button next to original size is selected. Afterwards, press OK, and this will prompt you to land your part. With the sketch currently selected, if you open up your Properties tab, this should be about 4.3 inches in height. If it's not, unfortunately, when you went to place it, you did not verify that original size was selected. From this point is now we can create some artwork. I have some artwork pulled up over here. I'm going to take this logo and then make a copy of it for this tutorial. You'll notice that this artwork is really, really big, so I'll scale it down so it fits onto our artboard. One thing about this artwork is we have a vector on the left-hand side, which is the cougar head, but we also have some text in here. Right now, this text is editable, so if I come over and I use the type tool, I can come over and I can edit this text over here by highlighting it and changing it to whatever else I want to change it to. Unfortunately, Fusion 360 does not see editable text. So what I'm going to do is, currently this is grouped together. I'm going to ungroup these objects, left click on the text, and then in my Properties tab is press the Create Outlines button. This will change my text from being a editable text into a vector. The rest of this logo was vectorized, so I'm going to keep that the same. Select all of my objects, group them, and then scale it to fit my artboard. Now that I've kind of personalized this project here, I'm going to center this up. And now I'm ready to take this artwork and move it back into Fusion 360. To do so, I'm going to go to the File menu, down to Export, and over to Export As. Again, I'm going to come over to the tree in my dialog box and select the Downloads folder. I'm going to call this Titan Kids 1 DXF, and then the file type I'm going to select from this drop-down menu as a DXF file. A DXF is a line format that many graphic design softwares and computer-aided design softwares recognize. Afterwards, go ahead and press Export and OK in the dialog box. Moving back to Fusion 360 we're going to go over to our browser list, turn our projection off, and then now we are going to bring in our new DXF sketch. To do so, we'll go to the toolbar at the very top to Insert, and then gesture down to Insert DXF. Again, Fusion 360 is going to prompt you, where do you want your DXF drawing at? Well, we again want it to be on the top of our part. I'm going to click on the top of the part. Again, do not click on the three normal planes. In the dialog box, we'll hit this little file folder to select our DXF file. In this new dialog box, we're going to select from My Computer, gesture to the tree, selecting our downloads, and then here's my Titan Kids 1 DXF. What I found out with bringing in sketch objects from Adobe Illustrator is you want to make sure that your sketch entities are off of your 3D model. Fusion 360 loves to make automatic constraints, and if you have your sketch objects on top of your model like this, it's possible to add in some automatic constraints that may hinder you from manipulating it into its exact location. You can use these free transform arrows over here to move it around and get it off of the 3D model. In the dialog box, go ahead and press OK. and this will lock that sketch into that position. Once it's landed, we are going to take this sketch and move it very precisely into its location. Now that our sketch is landed, now we need to move the sketch very precisely onto our 3D model. The easiest way to do so is by pressing the letter M on the keyboard for move. In the dialog box, we're going to go to the drop-down menu and select Sketch Objects. Again, as I showed you before, we're going to use a selection window. Starting with the left-hand corner, I'm going to select and drag through, selecting all of my sketch entities. Once I've done this, in the dialog box, I like to use point to point, and we are going to choose a point on the outside of our dog bone sketch that appears, and then we are going to find the same exact point on our 3D model. So I'm going to choose this point right here, and then our target point will be the same exact point on our 3D model. Notice once I select this, Fusion 360 is going to try to calculate that same exact location. It may take a few seconds for it to process, and then it will very precisely move it into that position. If you misclicked at any point, you can go into the dialog box, clicking on these X's over here to remove that point, and then choosing a new target location and see if that corrects the issue. You'll see that the artwork that we created in Adobe Illustrator is now on the top of our 3D model. There's a lot of powerful things now that we can do with this. Just like we did with our original sketch of the dog bone, we can extrude some of these objects now and give it a different effect. If I press the letter E on the keyboard, this again will prompt me to go into the extrude mode. So for example, if I want to extrude the letters of cougar above the part, I can left click on each individual one of these letters to select them. Notice if I orbit around, we have this blue arrow here. I can actually drag this arrow up, and this will give me a value of extrude. Notice that this value is positive in number here. This is showing that it's going up. If it was a negative value, it would actually be going into the part. If I change this value to say 50 thousandths, this will ensure that our letters here are 50 thousandths of an inch thick off of the top of our part. At this point, I'm going to make sure that the operation is joining, and that will ensure that it's joining to the original body, and then go ahead and press OK. Notice that my sketch has disappeared. Going over to the browser list, I'm going to turn on our DXF sketch, and then again press the letter E on the keyboard. This time I'm going to choose the manufacturing letters, and I'm going to extrude these into the part, which will be a negative value because I want it to cut. This time I'm single left clicking on each individual sketch object. I'm going to type in a negative value, so I'm going to type in a negative 50 thousandths. Notice in the dialog box, it already recognizes that we are cutting into this part. Again, I'm going to press OK. I can orbit around. You'll notice that this gives it a different effect. The very last thing we're going to take a look at is our cougar head. Again, pressing the letter E on the keyboard. On the cougar head here, I'm going to click on this profile, and I want the vast majority of my cougar head to be extruded up. This time I'm going to choose 25 thousandths to extrude up. And again, giving it a few seconds for it to process. And then press enter on the keyboard. That will lock that extrude into place. Now that I have the vast majority of the cougar head selected and extruded up, I'm going to take the remaining balance of my shapes, including these little cheekbones, the eyebrows, And I'm going to give these a different height other than the 25 thousandths. I'm going to change this to, say, 10 thousandths. Again, in my operation type, I want this to be on join, and then pressing OK. Now that I'm done extruding, I can go over to my browser list and I can turn the visibility of our DXF sketch off. This will hide that particular sketch and we are left with the actual 3D model. There's a lot of powerful things that we can do with our 3D model. One thing that you can do is you can send this to a 3D printer and it will actually print the dog bone off, including our logo. The next thing that we're going to go over is actually how to render our particular part. A rendering will create a photorealistic version of your part. To do this, we got to change our workspace by clicking on the Change Workspace button and then gesturing down to Render. In the Rendering Workspace, starting on the left-hand side of our toolbar, we're going to change the color of our part by left-clicking on the color wheel. You'll notice in the dialog box, the default setting is to apply our color to the entire part. In this example, I'm going to open up the folder labeled Metal and Aluminum. You'll notice if there's a color inside of these folders that needs to be downloaded, all you have to do is left click on the little download button and it will download that particular color. I'm going to use this anodized aluminum color here to color my entire part. You'll notice if I orbit around, my part is now anodized blue. Imagine if I wanted to do some post-processing on this particular part and I wanted the top of the word cougar to be, say, the raw satin aluminum color. Drag that color back in, but before you do this is you need to click on the word faces and then you can drag that color back in onto those individual letters. Imagine the word manufacturing. If I wanted to fill that with, say, some black paint, I can close this folder labeled metal and I can actually open up the folder labeled paint. This time going over to gloss paint and say I want to make the word manufacturing be black enamel paint. I'm going to download it. And again, going into every single little feature of the word manufacturing and adding in our paint colors. This is actually kind of a neat way to show off your artwork and your projects is by creating these really photorealistic versions of your 3D models. Notice that this is kind of a time-consuming part, is going back and forth to our dialog box and trying to zoom into these little features here. Lastly, if you look at my cougar head, you'll notice that the cougar head kind of blends in. Imagine I want to use that same exact black paint, and this time I'm going to apply it to the outside of my cougar head. And then also some of his facial features here. After I'm done painting and changing the appearance of my part, I can close out of the dialog box. And again, you can kind of orbit around. At this point, you'll want to make sure that your part is as large as you possibly can make it in the rendering workspace. You can see that depending on the orientation of your part, it will give it a different effect. So if I want to make something really, really dramatic, say if I want to use this for like my YouTube channel, is I can come in and I can come in at a really dramatic angle like this. Before you start rendering, is you can change the scene settings, which is the button right next to the color wheel. The scene settings will enable you to change the background scenery. One of the easiest sceneries to change is a solid color scenery. By clicking on this color swatch, this will enable this little slider here is I can change the color tones. And then inside of here, I have this little plus button, which I can gesture over to different colors, pressing apply. And if I don't like it, I can move that plus button around. So notice right here, I'm going to give myself more of a reddish color. That's too pink. Once you're content with something, you can close out of this dialog box. At this point, you want to try to make your part as predominant in the rendering workspace. Once you're ready to render, there's two different ways to render. The little tea kettle here is we'll take your part, and you actually have to have some paid for credits with Autodesk to be able to render it. If you have a computer that's good enough to render, is you can always click the little sphere with the start button. This will start a in-canvas render. During this time, you do not want to move your part in the rendering workspace, because you will find out that it will continuously try to render it as you are orbiting it around. In the bottom right hand corner of the rendering workspace, you'll notice this progress bar. Once the progress bar reaches excellent, or this little triangle here, which is the default is at excellent, is you can capture the image of your render. Depending on your graphics card, this could go fairly quick, or it could take hours to do so. Now that we're at the excellent part of the progress bar, we're going to capture the image. Again, going up to the toolbar, we're going to click on this little button that looks like a picture with the save icon. In the dialog box, we'll press OK. And we are going to label this as Titan Kids 1 render. Again, making sure that this checkbox is checked to save it on your computer. And then if you need to, you can click the three little dots here to change your file destination area. Going ahead and pressing save, and then that will save it onto your computer. Once your file is saved, you need to go to the sphere with the little stop sign. This will stop the rendering process. So if you accidentally move it, it's not going to tax out your graphics card again. Again, as always, make sure you are saving your files. To save your files, you're going to go up to the File menu, down to Save. This is going to be labeled as the Titan Kids 1. The location, if you need to change this, if you can go over to the little drop-down caret, you can go to New Project, and for this particular project is we use Titans of CNC. I'm going to label this 2026. If you're creating a new project, if you press the enter key, this will create your project. That way you can actually select it, and you'll see that over here for our location. Lastly, go ahead and press save, and this project is saved. At this point, this concludes this tutorial on how to create the Titan Kids 1. Create some custom artwork for it. Apply that artwork onto our part. And then lastly, render it in Fusion 360.